So I'm kind of surprised that I did not do this deck earlier. To those of you who are wanting it done, I do apologize. Obviously, this was like the archetype of, this new Rising Tide set. And I am referring to none other than Sea Monsters with Maokai and Nautilus. It was pretty much like the obvious, Maokai, Nautilus. These two things seem to work together. Boom, why don't we make a deck? So we did make the deck. And it's pretty fun, I'm not going to lie. But honestly, for an entire new archetype, for a new set, I think there's a lot of other better and more fun to play decks than this deck. That's just my opinion. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below after you take a look at the gameplay and the deck overview. And as always, we're going through the deck first and then 2 games. It's actually 2.5 games because the third one, it won with the Maokai, and I just kind of wanted to get that game in there because it always feels good winning with Maokai. So let's get into the games, and you'll see exactly what I mean. All right, first and foremost, shout out to all of my subscribers. If you have been following along with all these decks I've been making, thank you a lot. Appreciate the support. If you are new, hit the sub button so you can see all of the other videos that everybody else has been watching as they come out immediately. So anyways, let's get into this deck. This is a Sea Monster deck, and honestly, it's pretty typical. I don't think there's really too many ways to play this. This is one of the faster ways to play it, in my opinion, as far as really just trying to get deep as quickly as possible. There are some more control-oriented versions. I do tend to like the quicker version a little bit better. I will say this deck has been changed a little bit because I need to finally start to ladder. So while I'm doing that, obviously everybody and their grandmother plays Noxus Piltover aggro. And because of that, I need to build decks with that in mind. So, a couple things in here. We got Thorny Toad. Thorny Toad, although it works with this deck, is not always played in this particular version, mainly because it's a little slow. But because of all this aggro crap that I'm seeing on the ladder, kind of need it for the chump block, for the extra healing your Nexus too. And then we also have the 3 Dredgers in here, which help against aggro. But again, those are usually in any of the really fast versions of these deep Sea Monster decks, right? Jettison is something that is probably more specific to this sort of Sea Monster deck, as it is super, super fast. You get one of these bad boys off, and you're usually getting deep pretty quickly. Yibin Warren is an interesting card. I like it in this deck, especially against aggro matchups, mainly because you can pick off something like a Boom Crew Rookie or a Crimson Disciple, which you obviously don't want to stick around on the field because your opponent will just, have more turns to draw into some sort of combo to do more damage. Not fun. In addition to that, you have Jaw Hunters, which again is usually played in Sea Monster decks. This is a great card. Maintains card advantage while still giving you some sort of threat on the field to challenge one of your opponent's followers or champions. Having 4 attack is a huge deal. It's pretty weak. It only has 1 health, so it will 9 times out of 10 get Vile Feasted or something like that. But if you're playing against an archetype that does not have straight up removal like that, that 4 attack can definitely pose a problem. Beyond some of those cards, Lure of the Depths is another one that's probably typical to this version of the deck. Usually it would play 3. I am instead running, the Thorny Toads and stuff, again, for those aggro matchups. You also have the other typical, Sea Monster stuff in here. So the idea of the deck, if you have not seen this deck before or don't know what it does, is to get deep as quick as possible. Deep is, again, once you have 15 or fewer cards left in your deck, you get +3/+3 on anything that has deep. And the idea here is that you get deep, which also simultaneously activates Maokai as a level up, which obliterates their deck. And then you throw cards back into your deck with Nautilus so that you cannot deck out, but your opponent can. The other thing here is that you'll just have a crap load of big dudes on the field. And Shipwreck Hoarder will get you some treasures. Again, I'm only playing 1 here for more of the low-cost stuff against aggro. Usually probably play 2 in this deck, especially for the mirror match against any other decks that might be playing Nautilus or even Maokai. With that said, there's a lot of other interactions with this deck, but we'll get into the gameplay so you can actually see them in action. All right, so we have kind of, like I said, like 2.5 games here. We got a mirror match, which is essentially this game. We have an aggro matchup, and which is, again, what I kind of built this deck to make sure that it can handle on an okay basis. And we have Endure Spiders, which is kind of the half game. Like I said, I just wanted to show you guys the Maokai win condition actually going off. So, to get started, the mirror match. Okay, the mirror match. Whew. It's not easy, that is for sure. When your opponent, in this case, he's playing Twisted Fate and Nautilus, which I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I don't agree with that combo of champs. It is what it is. But the issue with this matchup is that his Nautilus is going to be able to prevent my Maokai from really being able to deck him out quickly. Now, the other option to actually get that Maokai strategy off is to get it off quickly enough so that he doesn't even draw a Nautilus, because Maokai very critically leaves 4 non-champion cards in your opponent's deck. So it could just mill any Twisted Fates or Maokais that he has. So that is the route that I decide to kind of focus on as I'm playing this game. I'm trying to get as many cards tossed as possible is one of the reasons why I decided to play that Maokai early on here. And even though I lost it, I'm not too worried about it. I have 2 more Maokai. I'm not really worried about my opponent milling my deck. Obviously, he is not playing Maokai. If my opponent was playing Maokai and this was just a direct mirror matchup, I would probably hold on to that Maokai in my hand like it was, I don't know, like I needed that thing to survive, because honestly, you do. You need Maokai in the mirror matchup in order to kind of have that last move against your opponent. You can see he actually gets deep faster than me, which feels really bad, man. That was quick, which means it's going to be a very hard game from here on out. He got it on turn 7. I believe I get it here on the next turn, on turn 8. So I'm not too far behind as far as that's concerned. I do have the advantage in having the 2 elusives on the field right now, which is something that I can sort of just keep pressuring my opponent with a little bit. It's not really the best way to go about this game, but he has to have an immediate response for that elusive sea monster before anything else really goes down. Now, the other thing I have to worry about, though, is the treasures. And you'll actually see this here a little bit later on in this game. Something like Keelbreaker dealing 5 damage to everything feels bad. Really, any of the treasures just feels really bad having them drawn against you. You can see here he actually tosses the Keelbreaker, so he ends up drawing it. One thing I do want to mention, right, about the Shipwreck Hoarder, and I think this is something that most people don't really realize about this card, which is pretty neat, especially in the mirror matchup. So Shipwreck Hoarder tosses 2 and then shuffles 2 treasures in. So if you look at the keyword deep, it actually says when your deck hits 15 at any point, right? And I actually forget the exact wording, but essentially what it's saying is deep triggers as long as your deck hits 15 at some point. So you can go deep and then shuffle cards back in and you're good to go. So one of the good things about Shipwreck Hoarder is that if you are at 17 or 18 cards, 18 if you want to get it on the start of the next turn, or 17 if you're trying to get it on that turn, when he tosses 2, you'll go deep, and then the treasures will go back in. So you will actually trigger that deep keyword before the cards get shuffled in, which is a huge advantage. That is something that you have to take into consideration with any of these card interactions, right? With any of these deep and toss strategy card interactions. So I do get my Maokai off. So I did play around getting it off as quickly as possible. Even though he went deep before me, I did still try to get it off ASAP. You'll actually come to find out towards the end of the game here, I don't believe he has a Nautilus. If he had a Nautilus, there's a very good shot that he would have been able to come back in this. That treasure chest that I just got was not really the best of cards. Like, they could have been better. Let's be honest, all right? It felt a little bit bad. I couldn't even play the Crawling Sensation which honestly, it might be a bug. Oh, sorry, no, he obliterated. So he obliterated my unit, which is why I couldn't play the Crawling Sensation. So again, obliterate is essentially a remove from game effect. Crawling Sensation says when one of your units dies. So obliterate does not equal die. All right. So yeah, all these cards aren't really the greatest. I am able to get a little bit of value out of Katarina's champion spell here when I attack to at least get some decent trades, but it's still not exactly where I'd want to be as far as, you know, big sea monsters on the field. And that's the problem with this deck. You need large sea monsters at this point. I don't have a whole lot of them, right? My field is not even sea monsters right now, and I only got 1/7/7 in my hand. Now, there are going to be some left in my deck. I do have tools that are still available to me, but if he gets to a point where he can start playing some huge sea monsters, I'm screwed. Now, I do draw another Obliterate dude, which is a 7/7, so I can go ahead and play that and obliterate his elusive if I need to. I do play the 7/7 first to try to, you know, bait an attack out. I don't think should have drew. I don't know why he drew like that. I guess he's still digging for a Nautilus, like hoping that he can play it on the last turn here. Because you don't know if you don't have a Nautilus left in your deck. I believe if Maokai goes off, if somebody knows for sure, go ahead and put that in the comments below. But yeah, he did not have a Nautilus, which is why he Shen emoted, and that was the game. So mirror match, again, a very difficult matchup, very weird matchup. You know, who can get their Nautilus off at the right time, who can get their Maokai off at the right time. But now we get into the aggro matchup, right? This hand is so good for aggro matchup. This is literally like the exact type of hand that you probably want to get. The Dredgers will suck up some sort of chump block. Right now, the reason I don't attack with the Thorny Toad is because I do not want it to take the 3 damage from the Grenadier. I want the Grenadier to trade with the Dredgers. That is the perfect world scenario. I have Ye Been Warned. That's why I'm hovering over it here. The Ye Been Warned, I want to use on the Dredgers and the Grenadier. Now, he kills it, but I have another one. So, again, this is exactly why this is like the perfect hand that you want right now, especially since it seems like the only real play he had was the Grenadier. That 1 health is just asking to be Ye Been Warned. All right, so if you guys don't know what Ye Been Warned does, I know it's not the most played card of the new set. It's a 1-cost slow spell, makes a unit vulnerable, and if that unit dies this turn, you draw a card. So I do end up playing that here on the Grenadier, so that way I can run the Dredgers into it. Now, he kind of screws me a little bit if he, you know, Mystic Shot something when I go into attack or get excited or anything really, but honestly, he's going to want to send that damage to the face. Like, it doesn't really make sense for him to save his Grenadier. And you can see here, he actually sends the Mystic Shot to the face instead of saving it for when I go in for the attack here. It just plain doesn't make sense to save his Grenadier just for the sake of me not drawing a card. He would rather have the damage go face. Now, the issue for him is I have this Toad thingy on the field, which is going to heal my Nexus too, and he does not realize that I also have another lifesteal unit in my hand. So I know I'm in a pretty good spot right here. And again, this is exactly why this Toad is so good in this deck when you know you're going to be playing aggro on ladder. And listen, if you're having trouble on ladder, right? I personally have not had much time to ladder lately. I need to do a little bit more of laddering. I know laddering is frustrating. I know you have to play a whole crap ton of games to get to Masters. But what you need to do is be aware of what everybody is playing around you. I know that where I'm currently at on the ladder, everybody's going to be playing aggro. Why? Most people play aggro on ladder because it's just quicker games. Unfortunately, I mean, you could, if you can't beat them, join them, right? There's that attitude. You can just join them, play aggro, and then hope for the best. You'll, pretty much beat anything that's not mid-range. And as long as you play better than your opponents in the mirror match, then you should be good too. Or you build a deck around what you're seeing on the ladder, which usually is what I prefer to do, so I can just outright beat what I'm playing against and try to ladder at least a little bit quicker than you normally would just playing the same deck. Legion Saboteur is another card that would have been a pain in the ass during the beginning of this game. He did not draw it until a little bit later, but she is a perfect target for Ye Been Warned. For Ye Been Warned, if you do have that early on in the game, that is another reason why that card is so good. Something like Legion Saboteur, something like the Grenadier that we just saw, anything with 1 health like that, or Crimson Disciple if you have a 3 attack unit on the board. Those are all perfect targets for ye been warned. So now we have this kind of half a game here, which is an Endure Spiders matchup. And I wanted to show this game because this is one of the instances where you actually win straight up with the Maokai. The aggro game, you didn't really see the late game strategy. The control matchup, or sorry, I should say mirror matchup, you kind of saw the late game strategy a little bit, but it was kind of convoluted because the other person was also playing sea monsters, so none of it really makes sense because they're also milling their own deck. In this matchup, obviously, my opponent is not going to be milling their deck. They're just playing a regular game. And what I'm going to want to do is basically stall out the game and eventually use my Maokai. The thing with Endure Spiders is they can theoretically get a huge They Who Endure out that will actually be able to kill all of my units. You know, when that thing's up to like a 20-20, it'll basically eat up 2 of my large units on the field. And honestly, it'll eat up 3 of the large units if they only have, 8 attack or so, which most of them honestly have 8 attack. The Shipwreck Hoarder has 10, so you honestly want to be trading that into something, into a They Who Endure if it ends up getting that big. But it could pose a problem. And so it's not something to just sit back and say, oh, we got this game. Like, all our creatures are going to be bigger. No. Once they have a They Who Endure, you are going to be in a tight spot. So we actually are deep pretty early on in this game. It looks like it was turn 7 or 8 that we got deep here. And we actually have 2 6/6 elusives on the field because of it. Those 6/6 elusives are so good, man. I do actually have to block here, obviously, because he's just pretty much attacking with everything on the field right now. But again, as long as we're able to stall out the game until this Maokai goes off, we are golden. And I think we only have about maybe 2 or 3 more turns until we actually level this Maokai. You can see, too, we have 2 Nautilus in our hand. That Nautilus, 100% okay, it doesn't matter how low our deck gets. We're going to have Nautilus to shuffle at least, 6 or more cards back into our deck. Even 3 cards back into our deck is good at that point. And you usually want to wait to play Nautilus, if at all possible, until as late as possible. So if we got 1 card left in our deck, great. If you do have to, for whatever reason, play another unit with Toss in your hand, you want to still be able to get that extra, 4+ cost Sea Monster or whatever back into your deck with the Nautilus. Try to get as much value out of it as you can. So we do finally get the Maokai off here, and that's kind of the writing on the wall at this point. Now I'm just trying to get as many units on the field as possible. I have the Keelbreaker. I have the treasure chest. We got all the tools at our disposal. I don't even think I end up using those. We even have the Nautilus. I don't even think we end up using the Nautilus. We just end up attacking straight for game. And I will say, it does feel really good to win the game like this with the Sea Monster deck. All right, everybody, that is the Sea Monster deck. So I hope, all right, everybody, and that is the Sea Monster deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it was a long time coming. Probably should have been one of the first videos I posted up. But again, if you have any comments or any ideas for videos I should do in the future, put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. As always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.